Good day, sir. We are the third group from BPO1A, and we are actually tasked to talk about the topic called Performativity Project 3, a political practice of identity. For in fact, Performativity Project has three types. The other two are called Performativity as a Theory of Identity Constitution and Performativity as a Strategy of Critique. The third project is that performativity is a political practice, which is actually our topic for today. While the stage is an important place to theorize the materiality and history of bodies and to engage performances that critique these normalizing practices, much theory in performativity argues that everyday practices of identity are political. These practices are evidence of agency, the ability to act, transform structures, large and small. In this type of project performativity, we have actually the term called disidentification. It is a political performative practice theorized by Mr. Jose Esteban Munoz on 1999. This identification is a name for survival strategies performed by minority groups that work on and against dominant ideologies, structures, and institutions. Mr. Patrick Johnson from 2001 to 12 described these historical practices among African Americans. For instance, vernacular traditions that emerged among enslaved Africans, including folktales, spirituals, and blues, provide the foundation for social and political empowerment. These discursively mediated forms, spoken and filtered through block bodies, enabled survival. Although they had no institutional power, enslaved black refused to become helpless victims. Instead, enacted their agency by cultivating discursive weapons based on an identity as oppressed people. The result was the creation of folktales about the bottom rails becoming the top riser, or spirituals that called folks to gather at the river. Performativity is a political practice argues that people can resist and change oppressive structures and ideologies in everyday life. Mr. Johnson argues that the stage, for instance, is not solely confined to the theater, the dance club, or the concert hall. He says that streets, social services lines, picket lines, loan offices, and emergency rooms, among others, may also serve as useful staging grounds for disidentificatory performances. Theorizing the social context of performance tours, the gap between discourse and lived experience by examining how squares use performances as a strategy for survival in their day-to-day experiences.
The intersection of performance theory and political practice comes together in queer theory. Teresa de Laurelis coined the term queer theory in 1990 to move beyond gay and lesbian as terms differentiated by gender and its overdetermined sexual practices. She was interested in understanding multiple sexualities and their historical, material, and discursive specificities. Others use the term queer as a way to make strange and taken for granted assumptions about gender, sexuality, ethnicity, and abilities. For Johnson, queer was his grandmother's use of the term offered in a thick black southern dialect. That shawl is a queer child. Queer theory is about material consequences, violence, exclusion, even death, that performative utterances like I am queer have in and on real bodies. Andrew Parker and Eve Kosofsky Cedric, 1995, explored the performative utterance I am queer for producing the effects that it names, especially in the U.S. military's don't ask, don't tell policy of the 1990s. They draw a parallel between Austin's conditions of a performative utterance and that policy. Representative Ike Skelton, a Missouri Democrat who heads the House Armed Service Military Forces and Personnel Subcommittee, asked the Joint Chief of Staffs for reactions to four situations. A private says he is gay, a private says he thinks he is gay, an entire unit announces at 6:30 a.m. muster that they're all gay, a private frequents a gay bar every Friday night, reads gay magazines and marches in gay parades. He asked what would happen in each situation under the new policy. The complex relationships among speech acts, identity, and effects produced by the naming are at the heart of the performative as a political strategy.
Performing life and death. Performances are not a luxury in queer theory but are politically charged by threats to life and realities of death. Works that explore the death of Matthew Shepard in Laramie Yomi, for example, explore the very real material consequences of politics that claim some bodies are not worthy of life and some practices are not worthy of protection. Still, other works explore the life and death of David Raymer, an identical twin born with XY chromosomes. At the age of 8 months, his penis was accidentally severed in surgery, known as the John Joan case in medical literature. Raymer's testicles were surgically removed. He was given hormone treatments and he was reared as a girl. At the age of 15, Raymer asked for surgeries to return him to a boy. Medical experts use Raymer's life and body as a case study to argue for foundations of gender identity in biology. Others argued for foundations of gender in social construction. Deirdre McCloskey quoted earlier in this chapter as the question who knows concerning those foundations for identity. What we do know is that in June of 2004, David Raymer committed suicide at the age of 38. Many movements have stakes in life and death issues: feminist performance, post-colonial performance, and queer performance. These performance practices struggle to bring subjugated knowledges across borders of power. Performativity is a political strategy for questioning the boundaries of normalcy, these borders of power that are constituted in language, in law, and in institutions. Perhaps it is no accident that the term queer performativity grew up around acts of dying. Right, Sue Ellen case, many people who died because of untreated AIDS made a political spectacle of their dying acts. A state funeral in another sense of the term.
Making bodies visible is at the heart of much political activism. U.S. history is peppered with examples of political coalitions making claims for social justice through theatrical tactics like the 1960s Black Power and Black is Beautiful marches and sit-ins. Elem and Krasner, way back 2001, The Actors, one-act performance created and staged by organizers of migrant field workers in California, and Sandoval and Sanchez, 1999. Take back the night marches that began in 1970s. Confront the rapists at work, and now protest staged by feminist organizations. Fraser 1999 and Hennessy 1995, and the contemporary performance of work of guerrilla girls and radical cheerleaders. Queer activism makes tremendous use of visible with the Kiss-Ins Queer Nation, Die-Ins by ACT UP, and Gay Pride Parade across the country, which is the case 1996. But the left is not the only side in political debate to make use of visible tactics. Peggy Pellan's 1993 analysis of Operation Rescue, the anti-abortion group takes seriously their crude understanding of making a spectacle for the sake of publicity. For the theories of identity, performatively as political practice must deal with the postmodern self as multiple, shifting, fragmented, and contingent. The question becomes, if performatively has undermined the stable subject, how can political movements recognize this and articulate a viable political praxis? Performatively as practical practice argues that political movement depends on understanding that identity is not our bodies, our cultures, our psyches, or our differences. For centuries, those foundations have been used to exclude to deny, and to destroy people.
Staking identity in performance. Chapter 1 argued that all performances circulate around mimesis, poiesis, and kinesis. Faking, making, and breaking are notions of identity and culture. Performativity takes these claims and foregrounds the fourth stance, and it is performance staking. What are the political stakes of saying, I am a subject in history, language, and material ways? Performativity opens up new possibilities for understanding identity as a claim to selfhood, with agency to work with and against dominant structures and ideologies. Jose Esteban Munoz explores the radically new political activism of Pedro Zamora on MTV's third season of The Real World. Munoz argues that Zamora insisted on being a complicated and intersectional subject, not only gay but a sexual person, a person of color actively living with another person of color in an interracial relationship, a person living with AIDS. Wendy Brown claims in 2003-574, Theory's most important political offering is this opening of a breathing space between the world of common meanings and the world of alternative ones. Space of potential renewal for thought, desire, and action. As a political practice, performativity is an important ground for grassroots organizing and macro practices of politics. Whether on the subject of gays in the military, AIDS activism, marriage entitlements, parenting, housing and employment rights, hate crime legislation, or religious doctrine, queer theory has turned common meanings of deviancy, pathology, perversion, and sin into the world of alternative ones. Indeed, Judith Butler's Gender Trouble in 1990 to 1999 was one of the works that helped the American Psychological Association to remove homosexuality from its classification of sexual disorders. The political practices of performativity do work to change